College Football 27 has the most in-depth recruiting and resource management experience to hit the mainstream sports gaming world in some time. With NIL being at the forefront of the Dynasty mode, it is vital you know what to expect going into your first rebuilds. To save you countless hours of starting and restarting, stick around as I'm going to break down how NIL expectations change from players as they progress from a recruit to an elite senior on yours or somebody else's roster. So if you find today's video useful, hit that like button, subscribe below for more as we have tons of content planned for you all in the coming months. Also send this to a friend who's in dire need of help in the Dynasty front. The first thing to note is going to be at the very start of the player's journey into the game during recruiting. When you're scouring the game for players to bring into your program, the biggest thing to note is what their expectations of NIL are. This is the baseline you need to achieve to satisfy their needs on that front. You have three options at this point. The first is to meet that expectation and receive no boost from NIL. Secondly, you can go above and beyond and get a boost according to their base NIL expectation. Right now, it looks like about 50% above asking is what gets you that 5 times boost, but not every recruit has that available, or it slightly changes so they're not 100% the same. Thirdly, you can go below their asking and suffer the consequences of being a cheapskate. With NIL being wrapped into Dynasty points, it is a lot to consider if you want to overspend on a ton of recruits and maybe risk not being able to pay players on your roster for future years or coaches later or develop your facilities. While I won't go into too much depth here on that, you can check out the video in the top right hand corner where I cover all the mistakes you might make in year one so you don't have to go through the same trouble I went through on your first rebuild. But back on topic, my general rule of thumb is to never go below a player's asking price, as this will either get you locked out instantly or severely limit you to the point where you gain no interest even from the hours that you put on the recruit. The best option is to offer them their asking price to start, and as you work through the season, adjust accordingly. Again, never reduce the NIL offer, but if there is a team hot on your tails, you will need to assess if offering them more NIL will get you that recruit at the end of the year. Keep in mind, whatever your most recent offer is to the player, that becomes their new baseline. It doesn't matter if you accidentally give them 500 extra points over their asking, they will expect that, and reducing it will reduce their interest with your team. Sticking with recruiting, there are actually a few ways to go about reducing NIL requests from players. The first and most obvious is to just be better. Once you start to increase your school grades, specifically grades that the player cares about, such as their hard sell or deal breaker, you will see the reductions to their NIL request. This takes time for the most part, so another route to go down is to invest into your support staff perks. There are 5 ability groups at launch, and one of the main ones actually reduces the base expectation of the players you recruit. While on the surface this seems like an immediate buy, I will point out there is a break-even point for these abilities. Since you spend Dynasty points elsewhere, you need to see a Dynasty point saving of at least that much to make this financially worthwhile. You can see the breakdown on screen. The top 2 perks actually offer the same break-even point, which is pretty interesting since it basically makes the gold tier pointless if you can afford the extra 500 points. As you start to invest in players, it is a good idea to plan how much you think you will spend, as these perks do not provide a retroactive boost at this point. So any players you already offered NIL won't reduce their expectations, so be careful to not purchase this late into the recruiting cycle. One last thing I wanted to point out in this section is that there are no coach abilities that reduce NIL from the coach archetype screen, which is something I found odd with this being the keynote feature of the game this year. And before we get to the second half of the video, I just want to ask you all if you're enjoying today's video or think it's useful, please hit the subscribe button below as we're nearing on 6,000 subscribers and we have a goal to get to 10K before the year. And I would really enjoy if you all joined us on that journey. And we're also releasing a ton of College Football 27 content over the next couple months. We're trying to release a video every single day to help you all on your journey as the head coach in Dynasty mode, especially with all the new features in the game. There's a ton of stuff to cover and a ton of new features that are really confusing so far for a bunch of people. So I appreciate y'all being here. I hope you all enjoy the rest of the video and let's get back to it. All right. On the flip side of reducing NIL requests, you can also just earn more Dynasty points. Similarly to just being better in the game, you will get better grades, which increases your points. So focusing on increasing team prestige, playing and winning games against premier ranked programs, and making the playoffs are all great ways to increase your budget. Also, you have AD contract goals. This is probably the quickest and most instant gratification way to get points, especially with things like winning rivalry games, which will net you 200 points for the next season if you can beat your rival. Lastly, with EA being EA, they added the new coach abilities behind a paywall, and within that, you can increase your budget with an increase from NIL Expectations. It also boosts your NIL offers, so you can offer less to get more of an impact with the recruits. Unfortunately, there is no other way to get this perk if you didn't buy the MVP Plus bundle at this point, but let's hope they add it in as some level 75 or so perk unlock so everyone can enjoy this at some point. Lastly, we have the off-season demands of players, and this is where your management of Dynasty points really comes into play. It is easy to budget for coaches or facilities because those are more or less stagnant or roughly so. As for NIL for returning players, this can and will be insanely chaotic, which if we are looking for realism, EA killed it in this feature. Regardless, you will need to plan for a large hiatus of players as it is no longer 100% about how well the player fits your school, but also how much they think they are worth. Even if you sit a player all season and give them a red shirt, if they have elite dev with a high rating and are progressing fast, you may still have to pay them way more than you did the season prior. There are two big things to point out for this. The first is to assume a 50% increase in points for your top players season to season. I have seen a little lower for some and higher for others, but a good generic rule is that 50% mark. Secondly, your grades still do matter in the end. Since you can offer a player their demand and they can still transfer if your school grades suck, you will need to continuously improve them to satisfy your players. Grades also come into effect when trying to reduce the desire to transfer. If you are really bad off, you may have to offer 50% over their demand, which is nearly double what they made the season prior. Or if your deal breaker grade is good with them, then they may only need 10 to 15% more to ensure them staying. One way I have found to skirt around this is to identify 20 guys you don't care to lose, whether it's younger guys who aren't ready yet or players with low speed or other stats. Keeping those guys with lower interest to return will artificially lower the player or players you do want to keep from transferring down the transfer totem pole. And since there is a cap on the number of players that will transfer in a season, this can save you a few of your top guys every year. But with that, those are my handful of things you really need to pay attention to about the NIL system when you start your first dynasties. And I hope this gave you a better understanding of how to manage NIL within the game. Let me know if you have any questions below and I'll answer them the best I can. But I appreciate you all tuning in and I hope you all enjoyed this video. And as always, I'll catch you all in the next one.